The table was already crowded when I walked in. Coats piled on the back of chairs, wine glasses half full. That warm, forced cheer people put on when they're about to spend hours with relatives they barely tolerate. Christmas music hummed in the background, just loud enough to pretend this was a happy night. My sister Ashley's house looked exactly like something out of a holiday catalog. White lights everywhere, a massive tree in the corner, perfectly folded napkins. My mom floated between the kitchen and the dining room, like she owned the place, correcting the placement of plates and telling anyone who would listen how proud she was. I slid into an empty chair near the end of the table and smiled politely. Same role as always. Show up, be pleasant, don't take up too much space. Dinner started normally. Small talk. Someone asked about traffic. Someone complained about the weather. Then my mom lifted her glass and tapped it gently with her fork. I just want to say how proud I am of Ashley, she said, beaming. She bought such a beautiful house. 3 bedrooms. A yard. This is what stability looks like. A few people nodded. Someone clapped. Ashley smiled like she'd practiced it. Then my mom turned her head toward me. And Brooke, she said, her voice getting just a little louder. Your sister bought a house. When will you finally settle down? There it was. Clean. Public. No hesitation. Ashley didn't even try to hide her grin. She took a sip of wine and added, Yeah, Brooke, you're not getting any younger. You can't keep bouncing around forever. The table went quiet in that specific way that only happens when everyone knows something uncomfortable just happened, and no one wants to be the first to react. Forks hovered mid-air. Someone cleared their throat. I could feel all the eyes on me, waiting. Normally, I would have laughed, shrugged, made a joke about work, said something vague like, You know me and let it slide. That's what they expected. That's what I trained them to expect. Instead, I set my fork down. I smiled. Not the polite, apologetic smile I usually gave them. A calm one. I already did, I said. I just didn't invite anyone who doubts me. For a second, no one spoke. My mom blinked. Ashley let out a short laugh, like she thought I was kidding, but didn't quite believe it. A couple of relatives looked back and forth between us, trying to figure out if they'd missed something. My mom recovered first. Oh, don't be dramatic, she said. You're renting. That's not the same thing. I'm not renting, I said evenly. That was the moment her smile tightened. Before anyone could jump in, my cousin leaned forward. She's not joking, she said. I've been to her place. The silence that followed was heavy. Not shocked, not explosive, just heavy. Ashley stared at me like she was waiting for the punchline. It never came. If you've ever been the invisible one in your family, you know that moment. The second when the story everyone's been telling themselves doesn't quite line up anymore. Quick pause here. If this kind of family drama feels familiar, drop a comment and tell me which part hit home. And if you want more real-life revenge stories like this, go ahead and subscribe. Back to the table. My mom shook her head slowly. Why would you buy a house and not tell us I looked at her? Because every time I talk about my life, you change the subject to hers. That's not fair, she snapped. Ashley leaned forward. So now you're trying to one-up me. On Christmas, I'm not trying to do anything I said. You asked. I answered. Someone muttered, Wow. Someone else suddenly found their mashed potatoes very interesting. My mom pushed her chair back slightly. You could have picked a better time. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and said, I'm heading out. Merry Christmas. My cousin stood up with me. I'll walk you out. The cold air outside felt cleaner than anything in that dining room. As I reached my car, I could still hear muffled voices through the door. Confused, defensive, upset. I drove away without turning the radio on. That dinner wasn't the beginning of the problem. It wasn't even the biggest blow-up. It was just the first time I didn't play my part. And that part had been assigned to me a long time ago. Growing up, Ashley was always the one people noticed first. The pretty one, the social one, the one my mom liked to describe as going places. I was the other one, the reliable one, the quiet one. If Ashley needed something, it became everyone's priority. If I needed something, I was expected to understand. When we were kids, Ashley's achievements were events, dance recitals, awards, big dinners, photos. My achievements were acknowledgments, quick comments, a nod before moving on. It wasn't subtle. It never had been. By the time we were adults, the pattern was locked in. Ashley's milestones were proof of success. Mine were just choices. Temporary ones, especially once I joined the Navy. To my family, the Navy meant I was never around. Never settled, always moving. My mom liked to say things like, "That's not a real life yet," or "You can't build anything if you're always gone." I stopped correcting her. What she never asked was why I chose it, why I left, why I didn't look back. That Christmas dinner wasn't about the house. It was about control, about who got to define what stability looked like, about who was allowed to succeed quietly and who was expected to stay small. Driving back that night, I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad either. I felt clear. Because once you stop trying to convince people who've already made up their minds, things get very simple, very fast. I didn't turn the radio on as I drove. I let the quiet sit with me, steady and familiar, the same kind of quiet I'd learned to live in growing up. That quiet had a shape back then. It sounded like plates clinking in the kitchen while my mom talked excitedly about Ashley's plans. It looked like adults leaning toward my sister during family gatherings, asking her questions, laughing a little louder at her stories. I learned early that attention in our house was a limited resource, and Ashley had a standing reservation. Ashley was 4 years older, which somehow turned into 4 years ahead in everything that mattered. She was outgoing, pretty, the kind of kid teachers remembered and neighbors waved at. My mom liked to say she had presence. I was the other one, the one who didn't cause trouble, the one who could entertain herself for hours with a book and not complain. My mom used that word a lot, easy. Brooke is so easy, she'd say, like that was a compliment. What it really meant was I didn't require much from her, so she didn't give much either. When Ashley did well, it was celebrated. When she struggled, it became a family project. When I did well, it was noted. When I struggled, it was framed as something I needed to work through on my own. I remember one year when Ashley got a role in a local theater production. It wasn't Broadway. It wasn't even a big deal. But my mom printed out the schedule and taped it to the fridge, like it was a tour poster. We rearranged dinners around rehearsals. Relatives came to see the show and brought flowers. That same year, I placed first in a statewide academic competition. I brought the certificate home and left it on the counter. My mom glanced at it while making dinner and said, "That's nice, honey." Then asked me if I'd seen Ashley's new costume. At school events, my mom knew Ashley's teachers by name. With me, she'd smile politely and ask, "So, how's she doing?" I learned not to point it out. Kids who complain get labeled dramatic. So I adjusted. I made myself smaller, quieter, useful. By middle school, the pattern had solidified. Ashley needed rides. Ashley needed help with homework. Ashley needed money for activities. I needed to understand that we didn't have the time or the budget right now. Once, when I asked my mom why she couldn't come to my piano recital, she sighed and said, "Your sister has a game. People are counting on her." I didn't argue. I nodded. I played anyway. Family gatherings were the same. Everyone clustered around Ashley, asking about her friends, her plans, her latest drama. I sat on the edge of conversations, refilling drinks, helping in the kitchen. Afterward, my mom would tell me how proud she was that I was so mature about everything. That word again. Mature. Translation, don't make me uncomfortable. My dad wasn't cruel, he just wasn't present. He worked long hours, came home tired, and deferred to my mom on anything emotional. If I brought something up, he'd say, "Talk to your mother," and that was the end of it. By high school, the favoritism wasn't just emotional. It became practical. Ashley talked about college like it was a given. My mom collected brochures, circled programs, made appointments. When Ashley decided to stay close and go to a local school, my mom framed it as loyalty. When she struggled with classes, my mom said the system just wasn't built for creative people like her. When I mentioned wanting to apply to schools farther away, my mom frowned. "That's expensive," she said. "And you're not like your sister. You need something realistic." Realistic meant small, nearby, manageable. I got used to filling out forms alone, talking to counselors alone, working part-time jobs without being asked how tired I was. Independence wasn't encouraged, it was expected. By the time we were both adults, the roles were fixed. Ashley was the one everyone worried about. I was the one everyone assumed would be fine. That assumption followed me everywhere. If Ashley missed a deadline, it was stress. If I did, it was irresponsibility. If Ashley needed help, it was family. If I needed help, it was a lesson. I don't think my mom ever sat down and decided to treat us differently. That's the thing about favoritism. It doesn't announce itself. It hides behind concern and good intentions. "She just needs more support," my mom would say about Ashley. "You're strong," she'd say to me. Strong became a cage. It meant I didn't get to be tired, or unsure, or angry. When Ashley started drifting from job to job after college, my mom framed it as exploration. "She's figuring herself out," she said proudly. When I stayed in one place too long, it became a problem. "You don't want to get stuck," my mom warned. "Life is passing you by." It was never the same standard. Ashley's life was a story unfolding. Mine was a holding pattern. Even when I started making decisions that clearly didn't fit the family narrative, the pattern held. Especially then. My mom liked to talk about stability. She talked about it the way some people talk about morality. Stable was good. Stable was safe. Stable was buying a house, staying close, doing things in the right order. Ashley fit that picture even when the details didn't add up. I didn't even when they did. So when I chose a path that didn't revolve around staying put, it didn't just surprise my family, it confirmed what they already believed, that I was the one who wandered, the one who didn't quite land, the one who would eventually need to be corrected. I didn't fight that image. Not at first. Fighting it required energy, and I was saving mine. I learned how to watch, how to listen, how to keep my reactions measured. I learned that in our family, being quiet didn't mean you were at peace. It meant you were being managed. And somewhere along the way, I realized something that would change everything later, even if I didn't have words for it yet. If I stayed, I would always be defined by what I wasn't. So I stopped trying to fit into a role that had been written for me before I was old enough to object. I pulled into my apartment parking lot and sat there for a moment, with the engine running, hands still on the wheel, letting the decision I'd made years ago settle again in my chest. I didn't join the Navy because I loved uniforms or wanted to impress anyone. I joined because it was the first system I saw that didn't care who my sister was. The idea came to me quietly, not in a dramatic way. I was finishing my last year of school, juggling classes, and a part-time job, listening to my mom talk on the phone about Ashley's latest situation. Rent increase, job stress. Another thing she needed help with. I stood in the kitchen, holding a mug that had gone cold, and realized something simple. If I stayed, I would always be the backup plan. The Navy showed up on my radar the same way most real turning points do, through paperwork. A conversation. A list of requirements that didn't include my family history. I talked to a recruiter who didn't ask about my sister once. He asked about my grades, my health, my willingness to commit. It felt transactional in the best way. Clear expectations, clear consequences. When I told my mom I was thinking about it, she stared at me like I'd announced I was moving to another planet. "The military," she said. "Why would you do that?" I shrugged. "It makes sense for me." She frowned. That's not a life, Brooke. You'll be moving all the time. You won't be able to build anything. Ashley laughed. You in the Navy, you hate chaos. I didn't correct her. The Navy wasn't chaos. It was structure. Chaos was living in a house where the rules changed depending on who needed them. My mom tried a softer approach after that. You're not like your sister, she said gently. You need stability. That word again. Stability. Always used to explain why I shouldn't leave, never used to question why Ashley never had to stand still. When I filled out the paperwork, I didn't tell anyone. I did it at night, laptop balanced on my knees, checking boxes and uploading documents while the rest of the apartment slept. It felt strange to make such a big decision without running it by my family, but it also felt clean, private. When the acceptance came through, my dad nodded and said, "If you're sure." That was the closest thing to approval I got. My mom cried, but not the proud kind. The worried kind. "I just don't want you throwing your life away," she said. I wanted to tell her I was finally picking it up. Instead, I said, "I'll be fine." She believed that part. She always had. Training was exactly what I needed, and harder than I expected. Early mornings, long days, instructions that didn't come with emotional cushioning. No one cared if I was quiet or easy. They cared if I did my job. The first time someone corrected me sharply, I didn't flinch. I'd grown up translating moods. This was straightforward by comparison. There were moments I doubted myself, moments when I missed home. But even then, the distance felt intentional, like I was putting space between who I'd been and who I was becoming. At family gatherings after I joined, my role shifted but didn't improve. My mom would introduce me as the one in the Navy, like it was a temporary label, something I'd eventually outgrow. Ashley remained the reference point. Her job, her apartment, her relationships. "You're always gone," my mom said once, not unkindly. "It's hard to know where you fit." I didn't answer. I knew exactly where I fit, just not in her picture. Being away made things clearer. The phone calls where my mom talked for 20 minutes about Ashley, and then asked, "So you're good before hanging up?" The holidays I couldn't make because of duty schedules. The subtle surprise in her voice when I said I couldn't drop everything and come home. "You used to be more flexible," she said. I was. When flexibility meant folding. The Navy didn't make me tougher, it made me more precise. I learned how to manage time, money expectations. I learned that being reliable didn't mean being available to everyone all the time. When evaluations came around, they were based on work, not comparison, not potential, not how much emotional energy I provided, just results. That was new for me. Ashley's life continued the way it always had. New job titles, new plans, new crises. My mom narrated it all like a series everyone needed to stay invested in. "You should come home more," she told me once. "Your sister needs you." I almost laughed. Ashley didn't need me. She needed an audience. There was a moment maybe a year in when I realized I hadn't felt that old tightness in my chest for a while. The one that came from trying to be enough without taking up space. I'd stopped measuring myself against a scale that was never meant to include me. The Navy gave me something my family never had. Boundaries that weren't personal. When I said no, it wasn't rejection. It was policy. When I committed, it was documented. When I succeeded, it was recorded. There was comfort in that. My mom still didn't get it. She'd say things like, "I just don't see how this leads anywhere permanent." Permanent. Another word she used like a test. What she meant was familiar, close, predictable. Under her roof, even from a distance. What I was building didn't look like that. And for the first time, I didn't care. I stopped explaining my choices. I stopped defending them. I let my life speak in ways my family wasn't listening for. Joining the Navy wasn't rebellion. It was alignment. I didn't leave to prove anyone wrong. I left because staying meant agreeing with a story about myself that never fit. And once I stepped into a system that didn't need me to be smaller to function, I stopped trying to shrink to keep the peace. I started unpacking my sea bag, without thinking about it, folding uniforms the same way I always did. Letting routine take over, where emotions used to get loud. Life in the Navy didn't turn me into someone else. It just stripped away the parts of me that had learned to apologize for existing. The days were long and predictable in a way my childhood never was. Wake up early, be where you're supposed to be, do the work, fix what's broken, move on. Being a woman in that environment came with its own set of expectations. Some people assumed I'd be softer, others assumed I'd overcompensate. A few thought I wouldn't last. None of that shocked me. I'd spent years being underestimated by people who were supposed to know me best. The difference was that here assumptions didn't carry much weight. Performance did. I learned quickly how to read a room without absorbing it, how to take feedback without taking it personally, how to speak clearly without softening every sentence to make someone else comfortable. The Navy didn't reward emotional labor. It rewarded follow-through. That was new. My first evaluation cycle came and went without drama. Clear strengths, clear areas to improve. No vague comments about potential or personality, just facts. I read it twice, then once more, surprised by how steady it made me feel. At home, though, nothing changed. When I called my mom, she asked where I was stationed and then immediately pivoted. "Ashley's thinking about moving," she'd say. Or, "Your sister is under so much stress right now." If I mentioned work, she'd listen for a few seconds before responding with, "That's nice, but I just don't know how long you can keep this up." Keep what up? My job, my life. Ashley had opinions too. "I could never live like that," she said once. "No roots, no normal schedule." I didn't point out that her schedule changed every few months anyway. I missed things, weddings, birthdays, random Sunday dinners that everyone else seemed to treat as a given. Sometimes I felt the absence, sometimes I felt relief. On base, no one asked why I wasn't married. No one asked when I planned to settle down. They asked if I'd finished a report, if I could take the watch, if I was ready for the next responsibility. I liked that the expectations were clear and limited. I didn't have to perform closeness to earn respect. There were nights when I came back to my place off base, kicked off my boots, and sat on the couch staring at nothing for a few minutes longer than usual. Not because I was lonely, but because I was tired in a clean way. The kind of tired that comes from doing something that matters, even if no one is clapping for it. I learned how to manage money because I had to. No one was going to bail me out if I messed up. I tracked expenses, set up automatic transfers, let my savings grow slowly, quietly. I didn't tell my family about any of it. They weren't interested in the process, only the outcome, and even then, only if it matched their expectations. Ashley's life, on the other hand, remained a group project. Every new job came with a celebration. Every setback came with explanations. My mom filled me in whether I asked or not. "She just needs support," she'd say. "You know how sensitive she is." I did know. Sensitive enough to always land on her feet somehow. When I couldn't make it home for the holidays one year, my mom sighed loudly on the phone. "It's just hard when you're never here," she said. "It doesn't feel like you're really part of things anymore." I thought about the years I'd been physically present but emotionally sidelined. I didn't bring it up. Being away didn't fix the family dynamic. It just removed me from the center of it. And that distance gave me perspective. I noticed how often my mom framed my choices as temporary. "Once you're done with this," she'd say, "when you figure out what you really want." As if I was still auditioning for a life she'd approve of. At work, I moved forward, took on more responsibility, learned how to lead without mimicking anyone else's style. I didn't need to be loud to be effective. I needed to be consistent. I started to enjoy the quiet confidence that came from knowing what I was capable of without needing to announce it. Back home, my mom worried about optics. "People don't understand that lifestyle," she said once. "It makes things confusing. Confusing for who Ashley never asked what my days looked like." She didn't need to. In her mind, I was still floating, still passing through, still not settled. I stopped correcting her. The truth was my life was becoming very stable, just not in ways my family recognized. My schedule was structured. My income was predictable. My responsibilities were clear. I knew where I stood. What I didn't have was an audience. There was a moment during a visit home when I realized something had shifted. Ashley was talking animatedly about a new opportunity, my mom leaning in, nodding along. I was sitting on the edge of the couch, listening, not shrinking, not waiting for a pause. I felt detached, not angry, not hurt, just detached. That scared me a little. It also felt like progress. I understood then that respect at home was conditional. It depended on proximity, familiar milestones, a version of success that looked good in photos. Out here, respect was earned daily, sometimes quietly, sometimes without anyone noticing at all. I preferred that. So I kept building my life the way I had learned to, step by step, without asking permission, without needing my family to validate it. Because the longer I stayed in a system that valued what I did instead of who I was compared to the less, I felt the pull to explain myself to people who had already decided what my life meant. I kept my routines tight and my explanations short. That combination worked better than any argument ever had. Most mornings started the same way. Alarm, coffee, uniform. A quick check of the day's schedule. I didn't think about motivation much anymore. I just moved. There was comfort in knowing what came next, even when everything else shifted around it. Money became part of that routine. Not in a dramatic way, just another system to manage. I set my transfers once and stopped touching them. A percentage to savings. A percentage to long-term accounts. Rent paid on time. No lifestyle upgrades just because a paycheck cleared. I didn't tell my family any of this. I'd learned that sharing details only invited commentary, not understanding. When my mom called, the conversations followed a script. She talked. I listened. Ashley's job. Ashley's stress. Ashley's plans. At the end, there was always a pause. And then, "So you're good, right?" "Yes," I'd say. And that was enough. Ashley's life looked busy from the outside. New positions, new coworkers, new goals. Every update came with enthusiasm, whether it made sense or not. My mom treated each one like progress. "She's really finding herself," she'd say proudly. I didn't ask how many times someone could find themselves before it stopped being a search and started being a pattern. The praise was constant. Social media posts, group texts, casual bragging at family events. Ashley had momentum even when nothing seemed to stick. My life didn't photograph well. There were no big announcements, no captions, just consistency. At work, my responsibilities grew. I took on projects that required planning instead of reacting, learned how to anticipate problems instead of waiting for them. My evaluations reflected that. Clear, measurable, boring in the best way. I didn't forward them to my family. I didn't mention bonuses or increased responsibilities. I stopped translating my life into something I thought they might respect. It wasn't bitterness. It was efficiency. When I did come home, I noticed how the tone shifted. Relatives asked if I was still doing the Navy thing. Someone joked about me being a guest in my own hometown. My mom laughed along, then reminded me to take leftovers because I probably didn't have much time to cook. I let it slide. Ashley showed up late to one gathering talking fast about traffic and deadlines. Everyone leaned in. My mom poured her a drink before she even sat down. I stood in the kitchen, rinsing plates, watching it play out with the detached interest of someone who'd seen this episode before. Later, my mom pulled me aside. "You don't say much anymore," she said. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I replied. She nodded, unconvinced. "You know it wouldn't hurt to share more. Let people in." I almost laughed. Let people in had always meant making room for Ashley's needs. The truth was, my life was getting quieter in a way that felt intentional. I knew my numbers. I knew my options. I didn't feel rushed. Ashley, on the other hand, always seemed to be sprinting. Toward what? I wasn't sure. The praise followed her regardless. Promotions were celebrated before they happened. Plans were treated like accomplishments. My mom liked to talk about how driven Ashley was, how she went after what she wanted. I wondered what it would look like if someone applied that same standard to actual outcomes. There were moments when I felt the urge to say something, to mention that I was doing well, that I was stable, that I wasn't lost. The urge passed quickly. I'd learned that validation from people who didn't see you clearly never lasts, so I kept building quietly. I learned which expenses mattered and which didn't. I learned how to read contracts, how to ask the right questions, how to say no without justifying it. I learned that stability wasn't a vibe, it was math. My mom still worried out loud. "I just don't want you to wake up one day and realize you missed out," she said during one call. "On what?" I asked. She hesitated. "You know, normal things." Normal had become a moving target, one that always seemed to land where Ashley was standing. I let the silence stretch. Ashley didn't worry about missing out. She worried about keeping up. New clothes, new places, new expectations. The lifestyle grew faster than the foundation underneath it. I saw it in small ways. The way she talked about money like it was temporary. The way my mom mentioned helping her just this once more than once. The way plans always hinged on something working out later. I didn't comment. Observation didn't require participation. One afternoon, my mom called and mentioned Ashley was thinking about buying a place. The way she said it made it sound inevitable. "She's ready," my mom said. "This is a big step." I pictured the spreadsheets I kept, the margins I respected, the patience it took to wait until things actually made sense. "That's great," I said. My mom sounded relieved. "I knew you'd be happy for her." I was. Genuinely. I just wasn't impressed by the performance around it. When the house finally came up in conversation again, it wasn't casual. It was framed. The next milestone, proof that Ashley was settling down. The praise ramped up. The tone shifted. There was pride in my mom's voice that I hadn't heard in a while. I listened. I didn't ask questions. By then, I understood something my younger self hadn't. In my family, success wasn't measured by how secure you were. It was measured by how well your life fit the picture they wanted to show, and I had stopped trying to be in that picture. I stayed focused on what I could control. My work, my finances, my choices. Silence wasn't passive anymore, it was strategic. While everyone else watched Ashley move forward in a way that looked good from a distance, I made sure my footing was solid, even if no one noticed where I was standing. I stayed near the kitchen counter longer than I needed to, rinsing a glass that was already clean, listening instead of stepping back into the noise. The celebration had shifted outside to the patio. Someone was taking photos. Someone else was already talking about furniture and paint colors. Ashley's laugh cut through everything bright and confident, the sound of someone who believed the story being told about her. Inside, my mom's voice dropped. "Not quiet enough." "I just don't know how you're going to make this work," she said. I froze, hands still under the faucet. Ashley sighed. "I will. I just need a little time." "Ashley," my mom said the way she always did when she was about to fix something. "You already have the car payment, the cards, and now this." "I know," Ashley said quickly. "But if I don't buy now, I'll never get in. Everyone else is doing it." There it was. Everyone else. I turned the water off but didn't move. "How much are you short?" my mom asked. There was a pause. Papers rustled. "About 10,000, Ashley said. "Maybe more if the fees don't get waived." My stomach tightened. Not in shock. In recognition. My mom exhaled slowly. "I can move some things around. I can put part of it on my card for now. Just until you get settled." Just until. The most expensive phrase in our family. I stepped back before they noticed me, heart steady, but heavy. The house around me felt different now. The decorations, the the pride, the certainty. All of it rested on numbers that didn't add up. When I walked back outside, both of them snapped into place like actors hitting their marks. Smiles on. Voices light. "Everything okay?" someone asked. "Perfect," my mom said. "We were just talking about logistics." Logistics! Another word that meant don't ask. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I'd seen this pattern too many times. Ashley took the leap. My mom built the net. The rest of us applauded. On the drive back that night, I didn't replay the conversation. I didn't need to. The facts were clear. The house everyone was celebrating wasn't stability. It was pressure dressed up as progress. I thought about the time years earlier when I'd asked my mom for help with a security deposit on my first place. She'd looked at me seriously and said, "It's important you learn to stand on your own 2 feet." I had. She just hadn't noticed. After that day, the house came up constantly. Group chats, family dinners, casual comments slipped into unrelated conversations. "Ashley's place is going to be perfect for hosting," my mom said. "It's such a grown-up move," someone else added. No one asked how it was being paid for. No one asked if it was sustainable. Those questions didn't fit the narrative. I stayed quiet. Not because I was protecting Ashley, because I was protecting myself. I knew better than to interfere with a story people were invested in. Pointing out the cracks wouldn't make me honest. It would make me the problem. So I listened. I filed things away. I noticed how Ashley talked about money in half sentences, how she brushed off concerns with optimism, how my mom mentioned covering a few things without ever saying how much. I also noticed how differently my life was treated in comparison. When I mentioned a raise, once my mom said, "That's nice, but don't let it go to your head." When Ashley mentioned a promotion that hadn't happened yet, my mom told everyone at dinner. The contrast wasn't subtle. It was structural. What surprised me wasn't that my mom was helping Ashley. It was that she didn't see it as help. She saw it as fairness. "She needs it more," my mom said once, like that settled the matter. I wondered when need had become the standard and why it never seemed to apply to me. At work, things moved forward the way they always did. Assignments, deadlines, reviews. I stayed focused. I didn't let family noise bleed into the one place that felt balanced. I kept tracking my finances, kept my habits boring and reliable. The numbers told a different story than the one playing out at home. One evening, while reviewing my accounts, I realized something that made me sit back in my chair. I wasn't far off from doing something I'd never seriously considered before. I closed the laptop without making any decisions. Let the thoughts sit. Meanwhile, the house celebration kept growing. Ashley sent photos. My mom forwarded them with commentary. "Look at this kitchen. Can you believe this is hers?" I believed it. I just knew the cost. When I visited a few weeks later, the tension under the excitement was impossible to miss. Ashley moved quickly, always distracted. My mom hovered, offering advice and reassurance in equal measure. "You'll be fine," she kept saying. "We'll figure it out." We. Another word that carried weight. At one point, Ashley snapped at my mom over something small. My mom brushed it off, eyes tired. "She's just stressed," she said to me later. "This is a big responsibility." I nodded. Responsibility was one thing. Borrowed stability was another. That night, lying in bed, I thought about how easily my mom had framed my independence as distance, but Ashley's dependence as closeness, how one was criticized and the other was protected. I didn't feel angry. I felt clear. I wasn't going to rescue anyone. I wasn't going to expose anyone either. I was done participating in a system that rewarded appearance over reality. The next morning, my mom hugged me tightly before I left. "I'm so glad you could come," she said. "It means a lot." I knew what she meant. I just knew what she didn't. As I drove back toward base, the thought I'd had the night before returned steady and persistent. It wasn't about Ashley's house anymore. It was about mine. Not as a comparison, as an anchor. I wasn't interested in proving anything. I was interested in building something that didn't require anyone else to keep it standing. And for the first time, the idea felt less like a possibility and more like a plan taking shape quietly, exactly the way I preferred it. I opened my laptop the next evening and pulled up the numbers again, not because I needed to check them, but because I needed to trust what I already knew. Nothing about the process was impulsive. I didn't wake up one day and decide to prove a point. I just followed the same pattern I'd been using for years. Look at the facts. Ask the right questions. Don't move until the answer made sense. I started small. I talked to a financial counselor on base, the kind who didn't flinch when I asked about worst-case scenarios. We went line by line. Income, savings, long-term obligations, deployment pay, housing allowance. Everything was boring, predictable, exactly what I wanted. "You're in a strong position," he said, "as long as you don't rush." I didn't rush. I talked to a realtor who worked with service members and understood relocation without romanticizing it. We didn't look at dream homes. We looked at practical ones, places that made sense whether I stayed 5 years or 15 months. The area I kept coming back to was just outside the base. Quiet streets, modest houses, nothing flashy. Somewhere I could come back to after long days and not feel like I was borrowing space. When I mentioned it to my mom casually during one call, she dismissed it immediately. "Why would you want a house?" she said. "You're never in one place long enough." She wasn't wrong about the moving. She was wrong about what a house meant to me. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I booked showings instead. The house I ended up choosing didn't make anyone gasp. It didn't have an open-concept kitchen or dramatic views. It had good bones, a small yard, a spare room I could turn into an office, a sense of calm the moment I stepped inside. I stood in the living room during the second visit and realized something simple. This place wouldn't impress my family, which meant it was perfect. The paperwork took time. Inspections, appraisals, more signatures than I thought possible. I read every document, asked questions, waited when something didn't line up. I wasn't chasing a deadline or an image. I closed quietly. No announcement, no group text, no celebratory dinner. The day I got the keys, I didn't take a photo. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and listened to the sound of my own footsteps echoing off bare floors. It was quiet in a way that felt earned. I brought in a folding chair and sat in the middle of the room, still in uniform boots by the door, letting the moment land without turning it into content. I told one person, my cousin, the same one who'd spoken up for me at Christmas without hesitation. She drove out a few days later, walked through the place, and laughed. "They have no idea, do they?" "No," I said, "and I'd like to keep it that way." We spent the afternoon assembling furniture and eating takeout on the floor. She kept shaking her head, smiling. "You did this the hard way," she said. "I did it the quiet way," I replied. Life didn't change dramatically after that, which was the point. I still went to work, still moved through my days the same way. The house didn't become a flex. It became a base. When I came back from long shifts, it was there. When I left for travel or training, it waited without asking questions. My mom never asked about it again. She continued talking about Ashley's house, like it was the only one that mattered. I let her. Occasionally, someone would make a comment about how temporary my lifestyle was, how it didn't make sense to settle anywhere. I nodded and changed the subject. The truth was, I'd never felt more settled. Ashley's house updates kept coming. Paint choices, furniture deliveries, complaints about repairs. My mom framed each issue as a badge of adulthood. "This is what responsibility looks like," she said. I thought about the checklists I lived by, the margins I respected, the decisions I made without needing anyone else to prop them up. Responsibility looked different depending on who was carrying it. There were moments when I considered saying something, not to brag, just to correct the record. The moments passed. Correction wasn't the goal. Independence was. At work, my schedule shifted. New responsibilities, more trust, less oversight. The kind of progression that didn't come with announcements, only expectations. I noticed how much easier it was to lead when I wasn't carrying family noise into every decision. When my sense of stability wasn't up for debate. The house gave me something my family never had. A place that didn't measure me against anyone else. A space where I didn't have to justify why my life made sense. When I went home for short visits, nothing changed on the surface. Same jokes, same comments, same assumptions. "You're always on the move," my mom said once. "It's hard to picture you anywhere long-term." I smiled, not because it was funny, because it wasn't worth correcting. Ashley's house was still the star of every conversation, the proof everyone pointed to when they talked about settling down. I let it be. I wasn't hiding my life. I was protecting it. The house wasn't a statement. It wasn't leverage. It wasn't insurance. It was mine. And that was enough. By the time winter rolled around, the gap between what my family believed and what I actually lived had grown wide enough that it barely registered anymore. I moved through my days, focused, grounded, uninterested in competing in a story I hadn't agreed to tell. So when the invitation for Christmas came through, full of cheerful updates and logistical details, I accepted without hesitation, not because I had something to prove, because I knew exactly where I stood, even if no one else did. I parked a few houses down and sat there for a second engine, off hands resting in my lap, letting the quiet settle before stepping back into their world. Ashley's house glowed from the inside. White lights wrapped the railings. Music floated through the windows. From the outside, it looked exactly like the life my family loved to point at and say, "This is what success looks like." I grabbed the bottle of wine I'd brought out of habit and walked up the driveway. Ashley opened the door wearing a red sweater dress and a smile that belonged in a photo. She hugged me lightly, stepped back, and glanced at my coat. "You made it," she said, like she wasn't surprised at all. Inside the house was full, relatives clustered around the living room. My mom moved between the kitchen and the dining table, directing traffic, correcting small things, soaking in the attention, like it was oxygen. "Brooke's here," she announced. Then immediately turned back to someone else to continue a story about Ashley's new neighbors. Dinner came together the way it always did. Plates passed, glasses clinked, small talk filled the space between bites. I stayed near the edge of conversations, answering questions briefly, offering nothing extra. Halfway through the meal, my mom stood and tapped her glass. "I just want to say how proud I am," she said, smiling at Ashley. "Buying this house, building a real future. This is what settling down looks like." There were nods, a few soft claps. Ashley smiled, chin lifted. Then my mom turned toward me. "And Brooke," she said, her voice carrying just enough to pull the room in, "your sister bought a house. When will you finally settle down?" Ashley didn't miss the beat. "Yeah," she added, smirking. "You can't live like a college kid forever." The room stilled. The familiar pause. The expectation. I set my fork down and met my mom's eyes. "I already did," I said. "I just didn't invite anyone who doubts me." For a moment, no one spoke. My mom laughed lightly, like she was smoothing over a misunderstanding. "Don't be dramatic. You're renting." "That's not the same thing. I'm not renting," I said. Ashley's smile twitched. "Okay," she said. "Sure." "I bought a house," I continued steady. "Months ago. 3 bedrooms, an office, close to base, paid for." A fork clinked against a plate. Someone inhaled sharply. My mom stared at me. "Why would you do that and not tell us?" Before I could answer, my cousin leaned forward. "It's real," she said. "I've been there." The room shifted. Not loudly, just enough. Ashley laughed again, sharper this time. "Wow, so you just decided to steal my moment?" I answered a question I said. "You asked." My mom's face tightened. This isn't the time. You made it the time, I replied. Ashley leaned in, eyes narrowed. So you think you're better than me now? No, I said. I think I stopped competing in something I never signed up for. My mom cut in. You could at least be happy for your sister. I am, I said. What I'm not happy about is pretending this is all happening the way you're telling it. The temperature in the room dropped. What is that supposed to mean? Ashley snapped. I heard you, I said calmly. At the cookout. The cards. The car payment. The money you were short for closing. My mom's head turned slowly toward Ashley. That's none of your business, Ashley said quickly. You made it my business when you turned every family dinner into a comparison, I replied. My mom's voice shook. Brooke, stop. No, I said. I spent years being told I wasn't stable enough, responsible enough, settled enough. Meanwhile, you were moving money around to keep this image intact. Someone muttered, Oh! Ashley stood abruptly. You're spying on me now. I was standing in the kitchen, I said. You were loud. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Not awkward, exposed. My mom's eyes filled, but her tone stayed firm. You're ruining Christmas. I looked at her. You used Christmas to embarrass me. I'm just not playing along anymore. No one spoke. Ashley stared at the table. My mom's hands trembled as she set her glass down. I pushed my chair back and stood. I'm leaving. Sit down, my mom said. We're not done. I am, I replied. I picked up my bag. My cousin stood immediately, no hesitation. I'll walk you out. We moved through the room without rushing. No one tried to stop us. Outside, the cold air hit my face and cleared my head. I breathed in deeply as we walked down the driveway. You okay, my cousin asked. Yes, I said. And I meant it. I drove away without checking the mirror. The house behind me stayed lit, full of people trying to piece together a story that no longer held. I felt lighter than I had in years, not because I'd said everything I wanted to say, but because I'd finally said what mattered. The next few weeks were quieter than usual. The group chat slowed. Messages came without enthusiasm. Memes instead of updates. My cousin texted one night, You're all they're talking about. I smiled and set my phone down. I spent Christmas morning in my own kitchen coffee mug, warm in my hands. Light coming through the window, just right. No commentary, no comparisons, just space. Work resumed, life moved forward. Then the calls started. At first, my mom left short messages, tense, defensive. Then longer ones, worried. Then one afternoon, she called and didn't waste time. Your sister is struggling, she said. Things are tighter than we thought. I listened without interrupting. She's under a lot of stress, my mom continued. The house is expensive, the payments, the cards. I looked around my living room, the one no one thought I needed. You're doing well, my mom said carefully. You're stable, and you're gone so much anyway. I didn't respond. You don't really need a house, she added. Not like she does. The line stayed open as her words settled between us, familiar in their logic and newly clear in their intent. I took a breath slow and measured the way I'd learned to before making decisions that couldn't be undone. I stayed quiet on the line, letting my mom keep talking the way she always did when she thought momentum would carry her through. She's overwhelmed, she said. Anyone would be. This market is brutal, and with everything going on at work. I leaned back against my kitchen counter and looked around my living room. The couch I picked because it was comfortable, not impressive. The table I assembled myself. Nothing extravagant. Nothing accidental. You're doing well, my mom repeated. You've always been good at managing things. There it was. The setup. I don't see how that's relevant, I said. She exhaled. Brooke, you're not here half the time. You're always traveling, always on base, always somewhere else. That house just sits there. It doesn't sit there, I said evenly. I live in it. But you don't need it, she replied quickly. Not like Ashley does. I closed my eyes for a second, not because it hurt, because it fit too perfectly. She's drowning, my mom continued. The cards, the payments, everything hit at once. If she loses the house, it will destroy her. And you want me to do what I asked. There was a pause. A small one. Calculated. Sell it, she said. Your place, just for now. The word hung between us like something solid. You could rent near base, she added, or buy again later. You always bounce back. Bounce back? Another phrase I'd carried for years. I'm not selling my house, I said. My mom's tone tightened. Don't be dramatic, I'm not saying forever, just until Ashley gets back on her feet. Back on her feet from what I asked. Choices! She snapped. That's not fair. It's accurate, I replied. You don't understand the pressure she's under, my mom said. She has expectations. So did I. Said, I just handled mine differently. The silence that followed wasn't shocked. It was irritated. You're being selfish, my mom said. This is family. I laughed once quietly. No. This is familiar. She ignored that. You're stable. You have a career. You can rebuild. Ashley doesn't have that luxury. I thought about every time I'd rebuilt something alone. Every move. Every transition. Every moment I was told I'd be fine and expected to prove it. I didn't get stable by accident, I said, and I'm not handing that over because it's inconvenient for you to say no to her. My mom's voice wavered. I'm asking you to help your sister. You're asking me to sacrifice, I said again. That's not what this is. It is exactly what this is, I replied. You're asking me to undo years of discipline because she overspent and you enabled it. She inhaled sharply. I raised you better than this. I didn't react. That line had lost its power a long time ago. You raised me to be responsible, I said. I'm acting like it. There was a long pause. When my mom spoke again, her voice was quieter. I just thought you'd understand. I do understand, I said. That's why I'm saying no. Her tone hardened. So that's it. You're just going to let her fail. I'm not letting anything happen. I replied. I'm not preventing it either. She didn't like that answer. You've changed, she said. Yes, I agreed. I had to. The call ended without a goodbye. I set my phone down and stood there for a moment, letting the adrenaline fade. My hands weren't shaking. My chest wasn't tight. I felt clear. Over the next few days, the pressure came in waves. First texts, carefully worded. Just think about it. We're all worried. Then voicemails, longer, emotional. My mom's voice cracking in places it never used to. Ashley never reached out directly. She didn't have to. My mom carried the message for her. She's embarrassed, my mom said in one voicemail. She doesn't know how to face people. I listened to every message. I didn't respond. I wasn't angry at Ashley. I was tired of being positioned as the solution to problems I didn't create. When I finally called my mom back, I kept my voice calm. I'm not discussing money anymore, I said. Or my house. She scoffed. So you're just cutting us off. I'm setting boundaries, I replied. That sounds like something you read online, she snapped. No, I said. It sounds like something I learned after years of being the fallback plan. She accused me of abandoning the family, of being cold, of choosing a building over people. I didn't argue. I'm choosing stability, I said. The same thing you've praised my sister for, just not at my expense. After that, the tone shifted again. Apologies appeared. Not clean ones, conditional ones. I'm sorry if you felt hurt. I didn't realize it sounded that way. We just assumed you'd help. Assumed? The word did more damage than any accusation. I told her the same thing every time. Calm, consistent. I'm not selling my house. I'm not lending money. I'm not negotiating. Some relatives reached out quietly. A few said they understood. A few said nothing at all. Ashley's situation worsened. I heard bits and pieces through others. Missed payments, stress at work, arguments. My mom tried once more, late at night, voice tired. "You're really okay with this?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She hung up without another word. Life didn't fall apart after that. It didn't dramatically improve either. It just stabilized in a new way. I went to work. I came home. I slept well. I stopped checking my phone so often. The distance didn't feel like punishment. It felt like maintenance. I realized then that this was the real test. Not the dinner, not the confrontation, but the quiet insistence that I return to a role I'd outgrown. I didn't explain myself anymore. I didn't soften my answers. I stayed where I was. And for the first time, I wasn't waiting for my family to understand before choosing myself. I woke up early and didn't check my phone. I made coffee, opened the blinds, and let the light come in the way it always did, steady and unbothered by anyone else's expectations. The quiet wasn't empty. It was organized. Work filled the days that followed. Briefings, meetings, decisions that mattered because people depended on them. I kept my focus narrow and my responses clean. The Navy had a way of reminding me what control actually looked like. You show up. You do the work. You don't negotiate with noise. When my mom tried calling again, I let it go to voicemail. Not out of spite, out of consistency. I'd said what I needed to say. Repeating it wouldn't change anything. A few messages came through from relatives. Careful ones. Neutral. Just checking in. I replied to some. I didn't to others. I stopped explaining my choices to people who only understood sacrifice when it wasn't theirs. Ashley's house went back on the market quietly. No announcement, no celebration. I heard about it through a cousin who didn't ask questions, just stated facts. The timing lined up with what I already knew. My mom didn't mention it at first. When she did, her voice was smaller. "Things didn't work out," she said. "I'm sorry," I replied. And I meant it. She waited like she expected more. I didn't add anything. A few weeks later, she asked if I wanted to come by for dinner. I said no. Not because I was punishing anyone, because I wasn't ready to sit at a table where the rules changed depending on who was speaking. At work, I took on a new assignment. More responsibility, less supervision, the kind of trust that didn't require reassurance. I noticed how little family drama registered when my days were filled with purpose. I spent evenings in my house the way I liked, cooking simple meals, catching up on sleep, letting silence do its job. I rearranged the spare room into an office, a desk by the window, shelves I built myself, nothing fancy, everything intentional. When my cousin visited again, she looked around and smiled. "You look settled," she said. "I am," I replied. She didn't ask about my mom or Ashley. She didn't need to. The distance between me and my family didn't feel like revenge. It felt like clarity, the kind that comes when you stop reacting and start choosing. I understood something then that I hadn't before. Quiet revenge isn't about winning. It's about refusing to lose yourself to a system that only values you when you're useful. My mom eventually apologized. A real one this time. No qualifiers, no conditions. She said she hadn't realized how much pressure she'd put on me to be the strong one, how often she'd mistaken my silence for consent. I listened. I thanked her. I didn't reopen the door all the way. Boundaries aren't walls, they're instructions. I stayed in touch on my terms. Short calls, neutral topics, no money, no comparisons. When those lines were crossed, I stepped back again, calmly. Without explanation, Ashley didn't reach out. That was fine. We didn't need a resolution to coexist separately. I focused on what I could build without anyone's approval. My career continued forward. Not dramatically. Reliably. Promotions came with paperwork, not applause. I preferred it that way. Sometimes when I drove home after a long day, I thought about that Christmas dinner. Not with anger, with distance. The moment I smiled and didn't explain wasn't brave. It was final. I stopped performing stability for people who only recognized it when it looked familiar. I learned that being underestimated is only a disadvantage if you need permission to succeed. My life didn't get louder. It got quieter, cleaner, more precise. I didn't win anything my family could take away. I built something they couldn't redistribute. When people ask me now how I handled it, I don't give advice. I just say the truth. I stopped trying to be understood by people who were invested in misunderstanding me. I chose consistency over approval, discipline over drama, a life that made sense to me over one that looked good to others. The house is still here, so am I. Everything else learned to adjust, and that's enough. If you want more real-life family revenge stories, military stories, and honest conversations about boundaries, favoritism, and quiet strength, make sure you subscribe to the channel. New stories are coming, and you won't want to miss them.